So today, we are jumping into one of the most notorious and, one of the most influential books on power ever put to paper. It was written over 500 years ago, but Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince is still this absolutely shocking and frankly super relevant masterclass in political strategy. So let's get into it and break down the ruthless logic of one of history's most famous or infamous political handbooks. Right from the get-go, Machiavelli tells you this isn't just some philosopher in a tower thinking up ideas. Nope. He's framing this as knowledge he earned from being on the front lines of politics. It's a handbook that boils down real-world wins and losses, both from his own time and from digging deep into history. Think of it less as a theory book and more as a practical how-to guide. But here's the real kicker, the story behind the book. When Machiavelli wrote this, he was basically out of a job. He'd been a top diplomat for the Florentine Republic, but then the powerful Medici family swept back into power and he got exiled. So, the prince? It was pretty much the most intense job application in history. He was desperately trying to show the new bosses his value, essentially saying, hey, you guys need to know how to keep power, and trust me, I'm the guy who can tell you exactly how to do it. So, what was this core problem that Machiavelli was trying to solve for his potential new employers? Well, it all kicks off with the kind of state they were now running. Machiavelli kind of brushes off the hereditary states pretty fast. I mean, if you inherit a kingdom your family's been running forever, your main job is to just not mess it up. The real challenge, and what this whole book is about, is the new principality, the state you just took over, either by force or by luck. That's where things get really, really dangerous. And this right here is the new prince's nightmare. Think about it. The people who supported you did it because they were unhappy and thought you'd make things better. But now you're in charge, and you have to do things to secure your power, like bringing in soldiers and raising taxes. So right away, your new subjects are let down. And what about the buddies who helped you get there? You can never really give them everything they want. So you find yourself stuck, right between new enemies you just created and allies you can't possibly satisfy. So you're in this incredibly shaky situation. What do? Well, this is where Machiavelli lays out his cold, hard blueprint for how a new ruler can actually grab hold of power and, survive. He says your strategy has to change completely depending on the type of place you've conquered. On the one hand, you have a centralized state, like the Ottoman Empire at the time. It's really hard to invade because everyone is loyal to the one guy at the top. But if you can conquer it and take out the ruling family, it's actually pretty easy to hold on to. On the other hand, you have a place like France, full of powerful nobles. Super easy to conquer, because you can always find some unhappy baron to help you out. But it's a nightmare to hold on to, because those same powerful nobles will just keep stirring up trouble against you. And that logic flows right into his practical advice. For example, if you take over a foreign land, Machiavelli's got a 4-step playbook. 1. The best thing you can do is pack your bags and move there yourself. It shows you're serious and lets you squash problems early. 2. Send colonies. They're way cheaper than an army, and they only tick off a few locals. 3. Play the game with your neighbors. Protect the weak ones and undermine the strong ones. And 4. Whatever you do, do not let another powerful foreign ruler get a foothold in the area. This is exactly the list of mistakes King Louis XII of France made in Italy, and, spoiler alert, it cost him big time. And all of this builds to this one chilling, unforgettable piece of advice. He says that when you have to hurt someone, you have to do it so badly that you never have to worry about them coming back for revenge. For Machiavelli, there's just no room for half measures. Decisive, calculated cruelty is actually safer than being kind of lenient, because that just creates enemies who will remember what you did and wait for their chance. Okay, so this leads us directly to maybe the most famous metaphor in the entire book. It's the one that perfectly sums up the two-sided nature a prince absolutely has to master if he wants to win. But first, a foundational rule. A prince's power has to come from his own people. Machiavelli absolutely hated mercenaries. He called them useless and dangerous. And it makes sense, right? They're not loyal, they're not disciplined, and the only reason they're fighting for you is a paycheck. They'll ditch you for a higher bidder in a heartbeat. If you build your state on hired guns, you're building it on quicksand. Real strength only comes from an army of your own citizens. So once you have your own loyal army, the prince has to learn to fight not just like a man, using laws, but also like a beast. He needs to be the lion, to be strong enough to scare off the wolves, your enemies. But the lion isn't that smart. He can't see traps. So the prince also has to be the fox, who is clever enough to spot the traps. A ruler who is only a lion or only a fox is doomed. You have to be both. You need overwhelming force and sneaky deception. And here's the brutal, logical next step from that idea. If you're going to be a fox, you have to be a master of deception. A wise ruler, he says, cannot and should not keep his word if it's going to hurt him. Now, why? Is it just about being a bad person? No. It's because, in his view, other men are not good and they will break their promises to you without a second thought. So if you're the only one playing by the rules in a dirty game, you're going to lose. This incredibly cold-blooded take on politics and people forces us to confront the one question that has made Machiavelli famous for 5 centuries. So that brings us to the classic question, the big one. Is it better for a leader to be loved by his people or to be feared by them? And Machiavelli's answer? It's completely direct. No ambiguity at all. He says, look, it would be great to be both, but that's almost impossible to pull off. So if you have to pick one, it is much, much safer to be feared. So why? What is the logic here? Well, it all comes back to his pretty grim view of human nature. He basically says people are selfish. Love, he argues, is a connection that people will snap in a second if it's good for them. But fear is held in place by the threat of punishment, and that is something that never goes away. And here's the key. A prince can't make people love him, but he can absolutely make them fear him. So you should always build your power on the thing you can actually control. But, and this is a huge but, there is a line you cannot cross. Fear is a tool, but hatred is a poison. A prince must be feared, but he must never be hated. So how do you walk that line? The rule is surprisingly simple. Keep your hands off 2 things, your subjects' property and their women. Machiavelli famously wrote that men more quickly forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony or inheritance. As long as you don't take what belongs to them, they will fear your power without growing to hate you for it. And that is the secret to staying in charge. Okay, so for the final piece of the puzzle, Machiavelli tackles the big question. How much of a leader's success is just down to their own skill, and how much of it is just pure dumb luck? And he uses this incredible metaphor to explain it. He says fortune, or fortuna, is like a raging river. When it floods, it just destroys everything in its path. It feels totally unstoppable. But, he says, you only see that raw, destructive power in places where no one bothered to build any defenses, no dams or barriers to hold it back. So he doesn't think we're just helpless puppets of fate. He actually puts a number on it. He figures that fortune controls maybe half of what happens to us, but that we, through our own free will and ability, are in control of the other half. We're not powerless. And this is where it all comes together. That other half, the part we control, he calls virtù. Now, this isn't virtue like being a good person. For Machiavelli, it's a mix of skill, courage, planning, and raw strength. A prince with virtù is the one who, when the weather is calm, is busy building the dams and the flood channels to get ready for the storm. He's using his skill to shape events, instead of just getting swept away by them. So that kind of leaves us with one last thought to chew on. In our world, which is still full of unpredictable events, those raging rivers of fortune, how much of what makes a leader successful today is still about being both a lion and a fox? You know, having the strength to face down crises, but also having the cunning to see the traps that are always waiting just around the corner. Definitely something to think about.